So today's special speaker is the Reverend Jan Limberg Morgan. When we arrived in Arroyo Grande some 7 years ago, one of the first things we did was to go to this place called Unity of Five Cities. And one of the first speakers was Reverend Jan. Her talk was so inspiring, her story so well told, we said, this could be a good place. And it is. Reverend Jan.
May something that I say this morning find a place in your heart, that it may go with you and enrich your life this week and for always. The theme for this month is wisdom, and I titled my talk, Thinking Outside the Box. So what is wisdom? What does it mean to be wise? The concept of wisdom brings visions of the wise man. Whoa, did I do that? Meditating on top of the mountain, with lines of people going up asking for advice or for guidance. Or maybe it reminds us of the great thinkers and philosophers of the past and present, and the revered at a level of wisdom that the masses, those of us, the rest of us, think we don't have. But the Random House Dictionary states, wisdom is the knowledge of what is true and right, coupled with good judgment. To be wise, possessing discernment, judgment, or discretion. That's the wisdom to determine the correct direction that we wish to travel. The wisdom to reject misguided judgments and labels. The wisdom to correctly direct our courage and our convictions. The ability to discern what is right and true. Authentic wisdom is to monitor our thoughts at all times, to sift out those that weaken and undermine our strength. And I think we all know what those are. To live our lives in love moment by moment, knowing that everything, both in and beyond our experience and comprehension, is a miracle. So what's in this box? The got-tos, the have-tos, the shoulds, the must-fits in, the not good enoughs, not strong enoughs, not smart enoughs. Some other items in the box may be who's right versus who's wrong, who's desirable versus who's not, what's politically correct, what's religiously correct, what's our standing in the hierarchy of life. How should I look, act, or be? You know, how easy it is for people to live without questioning. How easy to take what the majority are doing as the norm. I'm going to divert from my set talk here to tell you a little story about what happened this week while I was in the process of writing this talk. I have some cleaning ladies that come on Wednesdays, and Wednesday morning, when they got to my house, I usually go hide in the office while they clean the great room because I'm in the way. And I went back out to the living room to get some papers for my talk, and one of them had picked them up and was looking at them, and I said, oh, that's my notes for I'm doing my talk for Sunday. And she said, oh, do you recite from the Bible and then talk about what you read? And I said, oh no. We don't believe in a God, in a God. She said, and talk about heaven and hell. I said, we don't believe in heaven and hell. They are states of mind that our choices provide for us. Said, we don't believe in a God that judges us. We believe that God is all-encompassing everywhere. And each one of us, the best example I can give you, each one of us is a cup of that ocean that is God, a unique, individualized expression of the one. And I can't exactly remember how I finished it up, but she looked at me and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, thank you. You've made my day. And ordinarily, I never discuss what I do as a minister with people in my life who are not of like mind or who are not in the circle in which I choose to move. So I went to my office, and above my desk, I keep this little saying. So I took it down and took it out, and I said, Celia, may I read something to you? And she says, yes. There are many paths up the mountain, all leading in the same direction and to the same place. So it doesn't matter which path you take. The only one wasting time is the one running round and round the mountain, telling everyone else their path is wrong. And she looked and she smiled and she says, oh, thank you. I didn't continue the conversation. Her boss, the other lady, she speaks English, but we don't have deep conversations. And usually when I'm conversing with them, she will look to whoever's working with her for the translation or for support. So I didn't take it any further, but I'm kind of curious to see where it goes. Anyway, that's a little aside. You know, for many years, one of my guiding lights has been the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Serenity, courage, wisdom. Some years ago, when I was a minister of a church, we watched a documentary on a woman who was considered the spiritual leader of Thailand, a Buddhist nun known as Mai Chi Sansani. Excuse me. Mai Chi means spiritual leader. And the film followed Mai Chi Sansani through her long days working with the people of Bangkok, Thailand. Days working with single mothers and their babies at the center she founded. Most of the babies born out of rape. Whether she was accepting donations for food for her center, speaking to an auditorium full of prison inmates, or addressing the World Parliament of Peace. It didn't matter what she was doing, her expression remained the same, soft, gentle, and smiling. She was clearly a very strong, dedicated woman. However, her bearing was always graceful, and love exuded from every pore. And her message was one of love. She spoke simply of thinking only good things, of doing kindnesses and good for others, honoring the sanctity of life, in all its forms. She paid homage to the trees, to the elephants, to everything that exists. She hadn't always been a nun. She was raised by a single mother after her father disowned them, and she had precious memories of her mother, who was a powerful force in her life. She became one of the most popular fashion models in Thailand and moved in the highest levels of Thai society. And then she started questioning her purpose in life. The competition and high societal living weren't fulfilling the longings of her heart. She remembered how happy she'd been as a child, serving in the temple. She abandoned her career, her relationships, and her high living to become a Buddhist nun. In so doing, she found her greatest happiness and fulfillment. Her head was shaved and she wore white robes. She walked barefoot most of the time, and she spoke constantly of the value of all life. She touched hardened criminals, both in the male and female prisons. She taught the pregnant female prisoners to love their unborn babies, to revere their own bodies for carrying these babies, to give only love to the little ones around them. Because of her, the government of Thailand, recognizing the needs of these babies and these mothers, upgraded and humanized the facilities and the level of care given to them. Her message wasn't one of religion, it was of spirituality. It's of the sacredness of all beings and all things. She taught that no matter how horrible the crimes committed, they were committed out of ignorance. And even if a prisoner was in jail for life, he or she could still change their thinking and how to act from this point. She said everyone can change their thinking and change their life. Is this an example of having courage to change the things you can, and of having the wisdom to know where and how she could facilitate the change? Sorry, I'm missing something. This reminds me of a member of our own congregation. Does anyone else know who I'm talking about? Our own beloved Amanda Sherlock, who goes into the prisons, who teaches, who is a role model, a facilitator, a friend. It isn't all out there in the high stuff of Thailand or the Vatican or all these other places. We have it right here in Unity 5 Cities. How lucky are we? A book that has had a profound influence on my life is Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. I'd already lived a good bit of my life by the time this book was published in 1997. But what I found in reading it is that it put into order and perspective the principles by which I was living my life. At that time, I was in ministerial training. And this really, it brought together for me the things that were the most important to me. Be impeccable with your word. Speak truthfully and with integrity. You know, words can create or words can destroy. We can use them to uplift or we can use them to wound yourself or others. Don't take anything personally. What others say and do is a reflection of their reality. It's not a reflection of your worth. When you stop internalizing other people's projections, you become free from being offended and having self-doubt. Don't make assumptions. Misunderstandings cause unnecessary suffering. Ask questions, seek clarity, and communicate directly instead of filling in the blanks yourself. Oh, I guess because he, she did that, that must mean. Replacing assumptions with curiosity brings peace and harmony. Always do your best. And your best will change depending on your energy, your health, and your circumstances. Doing your best frees you from regret and self-judgment. But the effort is rooted in sincerity, not in perfectionism. And that sincerity is enough. That is your best. So when practiced together, the 4 agreements dismantle fear and judgment and self-limiting beliefs. They guide us towards personal freedom, authenticity, and a life anchored in wisdom, self-respect, and compassion. You know, wisdom is about living our lives day by day with integrity, with courage, with transparency, and with self-confidence. It's about living life where every hiccup or stumble becomes a lesson that we can learn from. In fact, if we don't learn from our hiccups and stumbles, maybe we need to pay a little more attention. And it is in applying that what we have learned as we move through the next phases of our lives. I'm going to tell you another story, one from which I learned some new things about myself. It was only some years later after this happened that I realized the full impact of this experience, and I recognized that, in fact, it had been a life-changing event. That same Amanda Sherlock that I just spoke of reminded me when I said, oh, I think I've told this story before. And Amanda said, so? She said, do the musicians worry about if they've sung a song before? Do they, Rob? Do they? Do the musicians worry if they've sung a song before?
Sometimes.
Thanks, Rob.
Depends on the song.
Anyway, so Amanda assured me that you would not mind if I told this story again. My training and experience in teaching had been 5th through 7th grade. But one year I agreed to join the faculty of a new school as a 2nd grade teacher. The team leader had scheduled a friend of hers to bring a pet to visit the children. Now, the leadership of this 2nd grade was not a model of democracy. And so the rest of us, there were 5 of us, the other 4 did not argue, and we didn't ask what kind of pet. So there were 150 7-year-olds, and 5 teachers duly assembled. And the area was probably as long as this from back there into the other area. I was standing in the back. So Bob and Fred, spelled P-H-R-E-D, arrived, and she was a 12-foot-plus boa constrictor. And Bob answered questions while allowing the snake to cross back and forth over his shoulders, holding the ends, and very, very comfortable. And he was answering the children's questions as this was happening. And one of the children said, "Can anyone else hold Fred?" And he said, "Yes. Let's have one of your teachers up here." Suddenly, there were 150 children and 1 teacher. Me. Now, I wasn't exactly saying the serenity prayer. I was walking to the front. I'd always been terrified of snakes, anything slimy, slithery, anything you couldn't get a hold of. And I really was not convinced from watching this man. But my greatest concern was for the children. I mean, honestly, what would they learn from 5 teachers that were afraid of snakes? So, I do know I was asking for help and for courage. And I told myself, okay, if you're ever going to overcome your fear, this is probably about as good a time as any. The kids were cheering, the other teachers appeared, and Bob draped Fred over my shoulders and showed me how to handle boundaries. Well, my Fred was on the clock with them because she was a lady, she was throwing hands, and the tail was back this way, and the head was back this, crossing over. She wasn't cold, she wasn't slimy, and she wasn't squishy. She was warm, firm, dry, and heavy. I can still feel her strength and her weight as she explored this new territory. Her tongue flickering at me. And she knew what I needed, so she gave me a hug by rubbing her head back and forth under my chin. Fred and I continued our dance while the children asked questions, but we were reveling in our new relationship. And when I finally handed her back, I was elated. No, I was euphoric. I had done it. I had kissed the dragon.
Okay.
One little boy looked at me and said, "Mrs. Limberg, you're so brave. You're even braver than my dad." After that experience, I sensed a new confidence in myself. I saw subtle changes in the way the children viewed me. Even the teachers in the teachers' lounge or at lunch or meetings treated me with a greater respect. Had their opinion of me changed? Because the story had gone through the whole school like wildfire. Do you know what that woman did? Or had my perception of myself changed? Had my bearing changed? Had my confidence changed? And in seeing this, they interacted with the new person. Another almost paralyzing fear I've had was of fire. Not contained in a fireplace, but like an open campfire. I do remember as a child being in the top story of our house, looking out over the flat land to the city of Swansea burning from the German bombs. The whole center of the town was burned, and I can remember, I was just a little child, but I can remember just wondering about the people that had lived in that, and it really frightened me. Years later, influenced by the exhilarating freedom that I experienced handling Fred, I walked on fire 6 times. And I went on to accomplish things that had once frightened me into immobility. I think the serenity prayer comes in here, summoning up the courage to change the things I can, to change my attitude, with a dash of wisdom about whether or not it's appropriate. And I'm going to close with some of the wisest words I've ever read. It's attributed to George Carlin, and I'm happy to give him the credit. Throw out the non-essential numbers. This includes age, weight, and height. Let the doctors worry about that. That's what you pay for. Keep only cheerful friends. The grouches pull you down. Keep learning. Learn more about the computer, crafts, gardening, whatever. Never let the brain become idle. Enjoy the simple things. Laugh often, long and loud. Laugh until you gasp for air. The tears happen. Endure, grieve, and move on. The only person who is with us our entire lives is ourselves. Be alive while you are alive. Surround yourself with what you love, whether it's family, pets, keepsakes, music, plants, hobbies, whatever. Your home is your refuge. Cherish your health. If it's good, preserve it. If it's unstable, improve it. If it's beyond what you can improve, get help. Don't take guilt trips. Take a trip to the mall, to the next county, to a foreign country, but not to where the guilt is. Tell the people you love that you love them at every opportunity. And always remember, life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. Namaste.